So, very excited to have this first fireside chat tonight. I've known Janet for, I think, over a decade. I don't know how that's possible because neither of us are over 29. And she's someone that's done every role in the ecosystem. So I'm very excited to go through what you've done today because I think there's a lot for the community to learn. And so instead of me butchering your introduction, why don't you give us a bit of background on yourself and then we'll go from there.
Is that good? Yes. Okay, first of all, I want to thank Jason and Alex and the entire TechTO team for organizing this and for having me. It's so great to see so many smiling faces in the audience. So first of all, thanks very much. So the question about my background.
Just high-level background, then we'll go in deeper into it.
Okay, great. So I grew up in Toronto, started my career at Procter & Gamble, then worked at McKinsey. I moved down to Silicon Valley and joined eBay in early 2000. Spent an amazing 4 years in Silicon Valley with eBay. Those were like the early days of eBay, awesome experience. Came back to Canada, launched Kijiji in Canada, grew that business. Great experience. Did a few other things. Then 9 years ago, decided to go into venture capital. Worked at a firm called Real Ventures for about 9 years, and then the fall just passed, like 6 months ago, decided to leave Real Ventures and start my own firm, Staircase Ventures, and we about a month ago actually, announced our first close.
Can we get a round of applause for the first close? So I want to take you way back to the beginning, not when you did like P&G and McKinsey, but a lot of people in this room over the years come to me and say, I'm an investment banker, I'm a consultant, I want to get into tech. You actually made that move. You went to the Valley, you worked at eBay. So why did you do that, and how were you able to do it?
Yeah, so it was late 1999. And as you said, I studied business at university. I'd worked at Procter & Gamble, like in marketing, and McKinsey in consulting. But I looked around at the world and I thought, okay, this tech thing is really taking off. And, technology is going to transform every industry. And I really don't have any technology background. And I need to get into technology because the longer I wait, the harder it's going to be. And so I thought to myself, okay, how am I going to do that? And I thought, so I was living in Toronto, and I thought, Silicon Valley, that's the best place in the world to get into technology. And I had done entrepreneurial ventures when I was younger, like in high school and university, and I thought, I want to go to Silicon Valley and join a fast-growing tech startup, because that way I'll learn about tech. I love entrepreneurship. It'll be a great life lesson. So that was sort of what I wanted to do. But as you said, I had no tech experience, no work visa, had no work visa to work in the US, knew nobody in Silicon Valley. But somehow I didn't let that stop me. And basically, long story short, what I decided to do was I thought my best avenue would be to go through venture capital firms because they would have a portfolio of companies, and that will be a lot more efficient than me trying to target one-off companies. And so I found a list of the top 10 VC firms in Silicon Valley, looked through the backgrounds of each of them. And one was a guy at Benchmark, a guy named Bob Cagle, and his background was consumer packaged goods and management consulting. So I targeted him, and long story short, ended up getting a meeting with him. Amongst other things, he had put the original money into eBay. He introduced me to Meg Whitman, who was CEO of eBay at the time. And I ended up moving to Silicon Valley and working for eBay. So I think to answer your question like that, so that's what happened. The lesson is, I'm a big believer that you can do anything you want in life. And it's not who you know or what school you went to, but it's about creating your own opportunities and being very persistent and thoughtful about how you go about creating those opportunities for yourself.
So I love that story. And for many people that are a bit younger, they may not realize eBay was the fast-rising company at the time. It was them and Yahoo. eBay's still around. I think Yahoo's still around. But you went to work with Meg Whitman, and I think you worked closely with her. Like, she built that company. Like, she didn't found it, she built it. What lessons stick with you from today from working with her? Like, is there anything that changed the way you look at companies, look at scaling? Any particular lessons?
Yeah, so many things. I mean, I would say the thing that I learned, I mean, just first of all, I will get to Meg Whitman, just being in the Valley it's a whole new bar, right? It was a whole new level in terms of what does excellence look like? What does good look like? What does a fast-growing company look like? So there was that, but also this power of believing and believing in yourself and just taking failure as a part of the journey, right? And that was really very much in the Silicon Valley ethos. Like, hey, you start a company, you fail. Oh, well, that's okay. What, are you going to start another company? You know, life goes on. This is all good. Which, you know, is very different, particularly from Canada at that point. I think in terms of what I learned from Meg Whitman was, yeah, again, it was this power to challenge people. I remember, actually, it was one person who, so when I went to eBay, I was basically responsible for all the non-collectibles categories at a time when that business was actually a very tiny fragment of eBay's business. It was about 10% of total eBay, and then we grew that to be really transform eBay. But anyways, there was a woman who was heading the clothing category who reported to me, and she stood up in front of the executives and gave her plan for how they were going to grow the clothing category, and she talked about all the reasons why clothing should be bought and sold on eBay, and therefore they were going to triple the business the next year. And Meg Whitman said, wait a minute, you had me really excited until you told me that you were going to triple. Based on everything you've just told me, I think you should be doing a lot more than tripling the business. So, I mean, that just gives you like an idea of like the bar, right? The bar and the standard is one small thing. I think another thing that I learned from eBay was just the importance of listening to your customers and following your customers. And, you know, I remember Meg Whitman saying once, she said, you know, every time we get a bunch of smart MBAs in a room, we inevitably make the wrong decision. But when we listen to our customers and let them drive our direction, we always make the right decision. So a few little things there.
So I love that. You're close to Meg. You're in San Francisco. You were at HQ at a high-rising company. Why take the challenge of coming to Canada and starting Kijiji?
Yeah, so this was not part of the plan, just to come to Canada. So just rewind. So basically what happened was I was living in Silicon Valley at eBay and doing very well, but I wanted to move to Canada because, frankly, I wanted to live in Canada. And what was interesting was living in the Valley, as much as I loved the learning and the opportunity, I realized living there that actually what I wanted to do was be in Canada. And that, you know, this is where I wanted to have a family. This is where I wanted to live long term. And so part of that experience made me a very patriotic Canadian. But I decided for that, hey, we wanted to move. And my husband, who was also Canadian, although he would rather stay there and play golf all year, but so I wasn't really. I sort of decided, I'm pulling him back to that we were going to move back to Canada, and eBay said basically like all we have is this lower role, which was basically responsible for the eBay.ca website. But I said, well, that's okay, I'll come back because I want to live in Canada. And I think it's another sort of guiding light in my career is always to yes, be very thoughtful on my career, but at the end of the day, I think life is bigger than your career, and I tend to do things that I really feel passionate about. And even though for a lot of people, they thought, why would you like leave head office to move to have like a lower position in a business a fraction of the size you were running to be in Canada? Well, it's because, well, this is where I want to live, and I'll figure it out. But anyway, so I came back with Canada, did a bunch of analysis on the Canadian market, and realized that Canadians spend a ton of time online, research online, but prefer to transact offline. And so based on that, I said the eBay model is never going to be the dominant market in Canada, and we should look at launching a classified site. And basically had to fight head office to finally convince them that we should be launching a classified site in Canada, and that was Kijiji.
Any tips on how to get the resources to do that? If they didn't want to do it, how did you convince them? What was...
Well, I think, so first of all, what happened was I tried to convince them, then they said, no, we don't like Craigslist is already there, and it's all about a first mover advantage, and Canada's a small market. So I then found out that eBay was getting ready to launch a classified site in Europe. So I went back and said, hey, how about I just take the code and localize it for Canada and launch it. And so they said, well, okay, you can do that, Janet, but you're not going to get many resources, and you can move from eBay over to do this thing that you want to do, but we're going to backfill your role. So if this whole Kijiji thing that you want to do fails, we're not going to have a job for you back at eBay. So it was a bit of a, have to believe in yourself. Mind you, I thought, whatever, if it fails, I'll find another job. But so how I persuade them, I just basically persistence, data, willing to go with very little budget, and
So no risk for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, only upside. And Kijiji works.
Yes.
So you could be the hero. You've been at headquarters. You've helped eBay grow. You go to Canada. You convince them to do a business they didn't know they wanted to do that now succeeds. Then you leave, and and somehow you end up at Real Ventures. So why leave Kijiji, and how did you end up at Real Ventures?
Yeah, so in Kijiji, I was running the Canadian business. Then they promoted me because Canada ended up being so successful that, I shouldn't say successful. Ended up being the most successful country, so then I was running the global Kijiji business. But I guess it's this thing about listening to your heart that I'm a big believer in. And so, again, I was traveling around the world. My son was young. He was at home. I realized in a year's time he was going to be in kindergarten, and I was like, I want to spend time at home with my son. So I left and basically took about 9 months off, although actually I didn't really take it off because I was volunteering for things and doing a bunch of projects and taking up new hobbies, but I was about home more. And then I did that, and then I started my own consulting business and did a few other things, and then Real Ventures came calling, and I decided to go into venture capital.
So you did that now for almost a decade.
Yeah.
What was the biggest shock about being a venture capitalist, or being a venture
capitalist?
capitalist?
What? I mean, I don't know if it was a shock. It's how much I loved it. I think it was number one, how much I loved it, even though I thought I would love it, I really love it. But then the other shock was the community around technology. I think that was the biggest shock. I thought, okay, all of the venture capital folks are going to be competing against each other, so the other venture capital firms are not going to be nice to me. And yeah, okay, the startups, I don't know how that relationship will work, and I didn't realize that the startups actually that they had these events. And so I think what amazed me most was the community and how much I love the community.
And then, so you've been doing it 10 years or 9 years, and we'll get into your current fund in a second, but in those 9 years, what did you learn about how you select who to invest in, what makes a successful founder? Is there any lessons you've learned from, because you invest really early stage. Yeah. So talk us about what you've learned and how you've changed how you look at startups.
So I think one of the biggest things that I thought when I joined Real Ventures, I thought, okay, I got this figured out now. What all I'm going to do, I'm going to make life really easy for myself. And I'm only going to invest in people who have, 15, 20 years work experience, who really know what they're doing. Why would I ever invest in somebody right out of university who doesn't know what they're doing? I'll just invest in experienced people. This is going to be easy. But then I realized, actually, that's not quite right. And what I realized was some of the most successful entrepreneurs are actually the people who are right out of university, and the people who I most enjoyed working with. And the reason is because they know what they know, and they know what they don't know. They're like a sponge for knowledge, and they're willing to learn and work and take feedback, and they grow exponentially. On the other side, you have some entrepreneurs who are experienced who do really well, but you also have some people who are hey, I've been doing things, working, I guess. I've been working for 15, 20 years. I know how things are done. And those actually are the most difficult founders to work with and to have success. I think that everybody needs to, it's you need to have a balance. This most successful founders, they need to have a balance. They need to have that confidence in themselves to do it, but they also need to have that humility, okay, there's a lot of things I don't know, so I really want to talk to other people. I want to learn. I want to take feedback. And they're like, that second part enables them to continually grow.
And, you basically were at Real, you're a partner, you've left to start Staircase.
Yeah.
Why be your own, why be a solo GP?
Well, I think a couple of things that I realized. First of all, I realized that I love to work with founders. I absolutely love that. I love to see their success, and I love to mentor them and to see them grow. I love meeting up new founders, learning about new ideas. What I found is if you're a partner at a fund and the fund gets bigger and bigger and bigger, then you spend a lot of time managing the firm as opposed to being a partner. And, I took some time and I was very deliberate in my thinking in terms of what do I love to do? What gets me really excited? Where do I think that I can be uniquely good? And I came to, all I want to do basically is like focus on founders and investing in founders and working with founders and being involved in the community. And by being a solo GP, that enables me to do that. It also taps into my own entrepreneurial, drive and a desire that I had to do things differently in venture capital.
So what are you doing differently then? That was a nice setup for your positioning.
So the biggest, I think there's two key things. One is all around founder and founder development and founder support, and I'll talk about, and the other is the depth of our advisors. And so one of the things that I realized is, early stage investors, almost all early stage investors will say the founders are the most important thing, right? They say, oh, it's all about the founders, it's all about the founders. But then you look at how most venture capital, early stage or late stage venture capital firms are structured. They typically have partners, and then they hire people like the platform team to help the companies grow. So Andreessen Horowitz sort of led the way with this, right? But firms are increasingly saying, hey, we're going to hire somebody who's on their venture capital firm that's going to help with talent. We're really going to help you hire the right people. Then we're going to hire a marketing person in-house, and we're going to help you with your marketing. And guess what? We're going to help you introduce you to customers, and that's all great. But I was like, okay, well, wait a minute. If the founder is the most important ingredient to success, then why are these VC firms putting all their resources into building the business and not the founder? And I said, I want to focus and do more than any other firm out there in terms of helping founders develop and looking at, literally over 100 companies that I have tracked with my time at Real Ventures. What are the differentiators? What are the things that make some founders successful and thrive and some struggle and not able to adopt? And I came up with what I call a 5-pillar platform, which is what we provide to all of the founders. So number one, CEO coaching, executive coaching. So I have found that can be a key differentiator for success. So all CEOs, the Staircase pays for the CEO to have an executive coach for the first 12 months. We have peer support groups. Another thing that I have found to be extremely successful in like organizations like this, but it's people having peer groups that they can confide in and surround themselves with. So we did a partnership where we pay for all founders to be part of peer support groups. Then the other thing is health and wellness. I'm a huge believer in health and wellness, whether that's mental health or physical health. And so we pay for all founders to have a personal health coach from Cleveland Clinic Canada. And whether that be the health coach is picked specifically for whatever the person's objectives are, whether that be, hey, I want to help with my anxiety, or I want to help sleeping, or I need to lose 5 pounds, or I never have time to exercise, whatever it is, help them. The fourth pillar is personal financial advisor. So all founders get a personal financial advisor to help them with their personal financial system, which is often ignored. And then the fifth thing is a family stipend, which is a cash payment in the first year to all founders to basically help with unexpected child care or unexpected, elderly care, or just frankly, you haven't seen your spouse for like a month, so take them out for dinner. And all of that is said, how can we help founders not only perform their best, but like people are not machines. And you need to think about them as a whole person, because if something is hurting in one area of their life, it's going to affect them in all areas of their life. So that's all around the founder support. And then the other final part, sort of wrapping around that, is all founders get carry in the fund, which means that all of the founders benefit from the success of all of the portfolio. And that is designed so that founders support one another in the portfolio. So that's all about founders. Then the second thing is, in terms of the advisors, what I have seen is a lot of, when I thought about, hey, how could I differentiate Staircase, a lot of, I think one of the most important factors for success for founders is to surround themselves and to get advice and guidance from others who have built massively successful companies, who have gone through that journey and been smacked in the face and have fallen down and dealt with, almost running out of money, or their partner quits, or this or that. And so I recruited an awesome group of advisors who I'm so proud to be as part of Staircase Ventures, all of whom have launched and built billion-dollar-plus companies. They span a variety of industries, a variety of geographies, and a variety of functional areas, and all of them are incented to work on every single one of the portfolio companies.
Cool. I could ask you 100 more questions, but I'm going to ask you one more and open up to the audience. Okay. The last question I have is, what mistakes do founders make when they're trying to raise from a VC? What's the most common mistake?
I think one of the, I would say,
two. Okay, we'll let you cheat.
Number one is they don't talk enough about how they're going to sustain a long-term competitive advantage. Number one. And then the other one is more of a niche one, because it depends on the product, but a lot of times if they're selling a product that could be used by the person, like i.e. anything consumer-oriented, is they try to sell you on their product as opposed to on their business. Like, i.e., I'm like, what I mean is, hey, I'm selling, I don't know, I'm selling online tea, and let me tell you about how great my tea is and all the benefits and how it's wellness and da-da-da-da-da. But it's like, actually, I don't want to buy your tea. I want to invest in your company.
I love those two. So can I get a round of applause for Janet? Yeah. So thanks. Jason's now going to run around and take some questions. Don't be shy. Come on. Everyone here wants to ask questions.
Oh, there.
Hi, my name is Harshit. So I have a small question with you. I have been working with founders, and what I want to ask you is, often founders face a problem of expansion. They know how to expand, but they don't know what is the business model would be. That leads to the problem of funding after 1 or 2 years, because the businesses are not self-sustaining. Businesses are not self-sustaining, and that leads to the problem of fundraising every now and then to sustain the business. How do you advise those founders? And this is the problem with mostly the early stage founders.
You understand the question?
No, could you repeat it?
So if I heard correct, Jason, can you repeat the question, please?
Some businesses require multiple rounds of fundraising and don't get to break even or breakout velocity after the first round. How do you advise companies to navigate those types of challenges of building their business while fundraising multiple rounds?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of different questions in there. I mean, one is the latter part, how do you advise companies to fundraise while also running their business? So deal with that and then come back to the other part. I think you need to, if you're fundraising, you need to understand, if you're the CEO of a company that's fundraising, it is a full-time job for a period of time. And so number one, you need to make sure that you set the company up and your management up so that they know, like, you are going to be on the road, you're going to be fundraising for the next, call it 3 months, and the business needs, don't try to be the full-time CEO the way you were plus add-on fundraising, because both are going to slip. So that's like a little thing. I would also say with fundraising, you've got to be very careful. We had an efficient process. I get all your ducks in a row, get your deck, get your data room, and then go out and talk to everybody at the same time. I think there was another question in there as well, which is, what happens if you run out of money and you can't raise? Well, hopefully the answer is you don't get to that point. But I think more specifically, you need to be, as I would say, in this environment, you cannot count on a next raise. And I would advise any company that's raising today to have a plan by which they can get to cash flow positive with the current funding that they have. I was just gonna say, like, ideally, and then you can raise money. Right now, what is valued by investors is not growth at all costs. It's, do you have the right unit economics? And so that's very important. Okay,
Hey, Janet, how's it going?
great.
So at what point do you know when you should even start looking like to raise, right? Because like I've always been more scrappy attitude, like be as profitable as possible. But then you start to say, well, you know, if you had this certain capital, you could take it to the next level. Like, when do you know that point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So first of all, I would say you don't need to raise. There are lots of amazing businesses that have been built without any fundraising. I think the environment has changed a little bit, but I always used to say, like, sometimes people think it's like, it's a badge of honor to raise a round, right? And the media always celebrates it. And I always say, you know what, guess what? Raising a round of funding is not the finish line. It's actually the start line, and you just got to the next level of racing, and it's going to be even harder, right? It's like, you know, I used to race, right? I used to run, right? It's like, hey, you go from city finals to the provincials to the nationals to the worlds, right? And when you raise money, you're just on the start line of the next fastest race, right? So there's nothing wrong with not fundraising. To answer your question, I think you can go out and explore fundraising if you know very specifically, I'm going to raise X dollars and I'm going to do this with that, and I'm going to grow a lot faster. And as a founder, you need to believe that that incremental growth rate that you're going to get as a result of fundraising, as opposed to being internally funded, is worth it, right? I.e., if you're only going to grow 10% faster by raising money, it may not be worth it, because then you're going to get the dilution, right? Okay.
Hello. It's amazing that you got to get to like Silicon Valley such an early date. Would you say like ecosystem has changed in the Valley over the 22 years, and also maybe compared to Toronto too? Like maybe here it's changed as well, especially from the perspective of for like early founders, Canadian founders, because I think many people are like interested or thinking about moving there or not. So if you can touch on that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Absolutely. First of all, I'll give you a little stat. 20 years ago, if you look at all global fund, all VC dollars invested around the world, 20 years ago, 70% of it was invested by venture capital firms. 70% of it was invested by venture capital firms in the Valley. Today, that number is 49%. It's actually shifted. So what has changed? I don't know if the Valley has changed as much as the other places have grown. You know, when I came back from, I remember going to the Valley in early 2000, and I was just so struck by how people were talking. Like, everybody seemed to be starting a business, you know, and I just thought, wow, this is really different. But Canada is so different today, and Toronto, and around the world, it's very different. So I'm not sure that Silicon Valley has changed as much as places around the world have changed, and they have also become entrepreneurial hubs.
Janet, thank you for the wonderful presentation. Just a quick question. So I'm here with my grad school friends. We're currently doing a graduate program at McMaster University, and we took a course last semester. It was software engineering, and we actually planned like a app for health in terms of healthcare, and we were wondering if you want to bring it to for like patients and stuff, what kind of advice would you give to just starting out as like students?
Yeah, so I think I'll make the question a little bit broadly. So, hey, how do you get your first customers, right? Then I think, you start figuring out, hey, who are the most, who would be, what is the profile of somebody who would be your best first customer, and how do you go out and reach them, right? And so then you go out and figure out a way. If you have contacts, then and they can introduce you to people, that's fine. But just think through, and maybe or I shouldn't say figure out. Maybe you don't know, maybe you don't know. But try to think through who would be a great first customer, who's going to be receptive to this, and then talk to them. So, like as a little example on your thing, hey, your McMaster students developed an app for the healthcare. Well, I'd say, well, great, go and talk to the local hospital in Hamilton. And ideally the one that the students go and do their residency at, so they're used to working with the university and maybe receptive to working with you more so than, I don't know, Toronto General Hospital or whatever.
We'll take 2 more questions.
Hey, Janet. So my question is that with the fund focus that you have of focusing more on the founders versus, say, building the companies, right? How does that affect the way that you think about diversifying your portfolio in terms of subsectors? And then second, part B of the question is, what are the spaces that you're currently most excited about?
Yeah, and so I would say too, just on the question, the tone is, I am very focused on building the founders, but also on the companies, right? So you can't just do one because, and that's what the advisors are great for and things like that. But in terms of, I do think about, hey, I will invest in Staircase Ventures will invest in 12 companies in the next over a 3-year period, more or less 1 new investment a quarter. And so I think it's important that we diversify across different types of industries, just for the benefit of the portfolio. In terms of areas that I'm most interested in, personally, I like areas that are often overlooked by other venture capital firms. Maybe they're areas that are very significant areas of the market, but that you sort of have to scratch beneath the surface to see, there's actually a huge market there where it's very inefficient. No company has really gone after taking technology to that industry. There's a big opportunity there. So those are the types of things that I think are very interesting.
Our last question.
Janet, Zainab here. As a woman in entrepreneurship and a woman in venture capital, I relate quite closely to your struggles. And I want to understand, what are your plans to diversify your founders and the companies that they represent? Historically, we haven't had exactly the opportunities as a lot of other people in the industry, and I want to know, what are your efforts towards that area?
Yeah, so my approach is that first and foremost, I want to invest in the best founders, with the best, building the highest potential businesses. I think that therefore the focus is to expand the breadth, making sure that we are talking to as many founders as possible. So for instance, a small thing is that often a lot of venture capital folks will say, I never take any calls, I never take any meetings unless they're referred to by somebody else, by somebody I know. I don't believe in that. I think the best ideas and the most ambitious founders do not necessarily have contacts. And so we look at every single email that comes in our info at Staircase Ventures. I look at every single deck, every single email that comes in, so that I make sure that anybody who has a chance of getting a meeting if they're fit. And then, making sure that everybody feels welcome, that everybody is fairly evaluated. And then, in investing. I will say that this is not like I am not just investing in female founders. I believe in a huge proponent of diversity, but I think there is a huge opportunity as well, not just to invest in female and minority founders, but to help build diversity across companies. And so specifically, for instance, and if you look historically, the work that I have done is invested in teams, and sometimes those teams are all male. And then in those cases, I work closely with those founders to say, hey, you need to have diversity in your team from day one, and let me help you bring on diverse engineers, diverse leaders, and have been very involved in transforming organizations that otherwise were just all white male leaders to be more diverse companies.
Cool. Thank you for the questions. Jason Lodgers, one more question. If someone didn't get to ask you the question they had, what's the best way to follow up and reach you?
Yeah, so my email is janet@staircaseventures.com. Or if you forget that, you can go on the Staircase Ventures email website. There's like a contact us. We do look at every email that comes in there.
Okay, thank you so much for your time. Can I get another round of applause?